Everyone hits a bump in the road. What do you do with it? Be inspired as we explore the ways people experience, navigate, and manage the ups and downs and twists and turns in this road trip called life. Welcome to another episode of Bump in the Road. The basic podcast is always free. We also have a premium subscription called Bump 2 that lets you listen in on extended behind-the-scenes conversations with our guests. Check it out at www.bumpintheroad.us. Effie Parks is the host and creator of Once Upon a Gene, a podcast about rare disease and its impact on the families living with a child with special needs. It is a heartfelt look at coping, not coping, and rising to a challenge that no parent ever expects. But most of all, it's about an amazing woman who has found joy and wisdom in caring for her son Ford and in sharing that journey with others. Effie's love, care, and passion comes through loud and clear. This is one of those podcasts that has the power to change the way you see your life. And Effie, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us a little bit about how your podcast came to be.
Hi, Pat. Thank you so much for inviting me on the show. I'm really honored to be here. My podcast came about from desperation and because it didn't exist. And I found myself at a place where I couldn't go on that way anymore. I was so isolated and I was so sad and I was so lost. And I knew there had to be other people out there like me, and I had to find them because I didn't like feeling like that. And that wasn't who I was. And I looked for this community and I couldn't find it. I kind of found little bits and pieces. And when I did find that, that's what gave me hope to know that I could do something like that too. And I could help someone like me not feel as crummy as I was feeling. So at one point, I really just did Google, how do I make a podcast? And that was kind of the beginning of it. And the second I started it, Pat, the energy, the intention, everything that I knew needed to be there was just taken by everyone else who just came forward to be a part of it in whatever way that was.
Now, what spurred the search for meaning, if you will, and the search for this podcast?
5 years ago, I gave birth to my very first kiddo. His name's Ford, and he was born with a rare genetic disease called CTNNB1. So rare, it's just named by the gene at this point. And when he was born, that isn't something I expected in the slightest. I had these fictional ideas of what my life was going to be like as a mom and who my kid was going to be and all of the things that we were going to experience together. And when that is literally lit on fire and you're told we don't know anything about it, go home and love your kid, that is such a introduction to motherhood that was not even remotely on my radar. And it was a really, really traumatic experience.
What symptoms does your son have?
So this gene prevents him from producing enough of a protein that we all create called beta-catenin. And this is a very important protein, like proteins are. It has all the jobs to do with the cells. So the cell growth, the cell health, the cell reproduction, the cell adhesion. It affects him in many ways. It's a neurological disorder. So things you can see, he can't sit or crawl or walk. He uses a wheelchair for his independence and mobility. He is nonverbal. He cannot speak. He has very low tone in his trunk area, which prevents him from swallowing and clearing mucus from his chest. So he uses a G tube to be fed. He has severe dystonia in his arms and legs, so kind of the opposite, if you will. So they're very stiff and they're very flaily, and he doesn't have the best control over them. Several other weird things, like he has sparse white hair and white skin. He has microcephaly, which is a very small head. He has, just a bunch of random little things like that that come along with it. We don't know a lot about it yet. We're in the beginning stages. It was discovered in 2012, so all of our patients are fairly young. We have almost 300 worldwide at this point, which is great. There was only 50 when my son was diagnosed. So we're learning more about it, and highly motivated parents and doctors and researchers are getting on board to study our gene.
I can't imagine what a shock that had to be, particularly in this culture, this kind of super baby pregnancy culture that we find ourselves living in.
It's funny you say that. There's a book called Raising a Rare Girl by Heather Lanier, and she talks about the fact that she was determined to have a super baby. And there's no other way to put it. We're all just kind of given this idea, this grand idea of like, don't eat this, don't do this, everything will be lovely, everything is perfect. Your kid's going to be popular and fun and do sports and be smart and be an astronaut, and like you just really kind of get enamored with this idea and who you think your kid should be or could be and how your life is going to look. And you don't really think about the fact that this is all fictional. This is just you imagining, but you get so tied to it, that I think that when that is thrown out so abruptly, it is such a shock to the system because you really thought it was true. You thought you would get that because why wouldn't you?
I think there's a lot of that in our culture where we, project ahead how life is going to be. I always refer to it as living for a future that never happens. And as time has gone on, I've realized anything we project is never going to happen.
Yep. Yep, that sure is the truth.
How's it changed your perspective? And how's it changed you?
I honestly couldn't list the ways, and get all of them on this show. I had no idea that this entire population was just rolling around. Obviously, I knew there were people with terrible diseases and there were people dying, but like it was over there. And disability, right? Like, yeah, there's people in wheelchairs, there's people with disabilities also over there. I didn't grow up with kids like that in my school. I talk about one that I know of in the beginning of my podcast, and he was walked to class in between classes. He wasn't in our classes. Kids did things to him that weren't cool. Um, we weren't taught about disability. We weren't told that it was actually a diversity. We weren't uh we weren't included. They weren't included in our daily life. And we weren't encouraged to get to know them or know anything about it. It was just separate. And what a disservice. What a disservice we have done. And it still is there today, right? It's definitely getting better, but like people who are disabled, it is our largest minority. And it seems to be one of the most invisible ones still. That blew a whole giant hole in my in my house, like, wow, how have I not been involved? How have I not noticed? How have I not helped? That was huge for me, especially now that I'm raising my own little disabled dude. Like, I have to call ahead everywhere I go to see if I can come. I have to fight all the time to make sure that he can just get in a door somewhere. I have to make sure of so many things that I never imagined and that I didn't know people were suffering through just to go to the grocery store. Things like that. Um, Perspective in just what parents are going through, like what they're really going through. That that's a big deal, especially when there's a medically complex kid involved and how you still have to get up and go to work, but you're also giving your kid injections or whatever, or you're on the phone with scientists and you're raising millions of dollars to find a cure for them. And you're trying to keep a social life and you're trying to manage your mental health. I mean, it just really opens you up to realize what people are capable of.
Both good and bad.
Yes,
No, I've often thought that we're all disabled in our own ways, whether it is a perspective we have of, faulty parenting and how we deal with it. I mean, I think everybody has their things, but I think our society is so hard on people who don't fit the so called norm.
totally, totally. It's really heartbreaking, and I felt so much shame and guilt, even just, like, at first when they told me, what my son was gonna be like, I was, like, horrified, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, did I do something?" I'm afraid to tell people, like, just terrible thoughts, and that's because nobody ever told me, and nobody ever showed me, and I wasn't introduced to it, and people talk about it like it's hush hush or that it's taboo, and, like, he is the funniest kid in town, and he's amazing, and what he can do is so much more than most adults I know. Why didn't anybody tell me that?
I think that there is so much more to any of us than what we appear to be. And being disabled just it pushes people tend to not react well to anything that is not within their narrow scope of the way things are. It can be disability, it can be cancer, it can be unemployment, it can be anything that causes them to have fear. And I think it's all fear-based.
Yeah, people don't like being uncomfortable either, and a lot of people just don't even really have the skills to show up and be empathetic. Uh, like, not everyone knows how to do that. Not everyone has experienced something that really lets them listen and see you and hear you. They haven't necessarily had adversity, or they weren't raised with coping skills, or had someone in their life that they really loved that went through something like this or had been through something themselves, and they just don't know how to do it.
The uncertainty is unbelievable, and you must live in a constant state of uncertainty.
Definitely. Definitely. Um, all of us do. So much in this rare disease community, especially when you go to the doctor, right? Like, you think of, like, your neurologist as one of the smartest people in the world, and they are. But when the smartest person in the world is looking at you and your beautiful child and they say, "I don't know," man, that's just like getting kicked down the stairs over and over.
Is there any upside to the uncertainty?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's that perspective thing again. The upside is I don't worry about the stuff that other parents are worrying about now, and I am so grateful for that. I made a joke the other day on my show that this woman was pleading in a Facebook group about what lunchbox to buy for her second grader, and it was so important and this and that, and I just like, wow, I am so glad I don't have to worry about that. Like, that is so silly. And I also get to just, like, snap back into my life 100 times a day and be right there. I get to be right there, and I've learned how to do that. I've learned how to do that so well, to be in the moment and to savor them, because I know how important it is now, and I know that I don't know what his future looks like, and I am surrounded by people whose kids don't wake up the next day, and you just really, really learn what's important and what to waste your time thinking about and where to put your energy into, and it just it just really kind of slows things down in a really, really good way.
I think that these sorts of things challenge all of our own beliefs. It challenges them very deeply, and that's never an easy thing to take a look at. How How do you go about channeling this continual change that you deal with, the continual uncertainty, in addition to being present, which I think is 90% of it, but what else do you do to cope? I mean, how do you take care of yourself?
Well, lots of ways. First of all, I learned that self-care isn't fancy, it's not pretty, it's not expensive, it's not an event, it's not a trip. It is like little habits that you put into your daily life no matter what, non-negotiables. And one little thing that I do, I have this giant chalkboard magnet on my fridge, and I have 4 oxygen tanks on it. And my sister told me to put the 4 things in each oxygen tank that I have to do every single day, no matter what. So I put drinking water, breathing practice, eating something healthy, and going outside. 4 things, no matter what, I check off my list every single day. Not only do I feel like I accomplished something, especially on the really hard days, but I know those things are sustaining me and giving me life, and they're free, and I can do them, and I feel proud of myself when I do them. I feel rejuvenated when I do them, and they give me a jumping off point to do the other stuff. So those are like my non-negotiables. I also learned that taking care of myself is going to the dentist, not ignoring my care, not worrying that, "Oh, I'll take care of everyone else first," and, "Oh, I have to get a babysitter," but, like, if I don't go to the dentist, I'm gonna have to get a root canal, and then it's gonna suck even worse for everyone. Things like that. So I really try to take care of myself in these small ways that I know add up and have a big impact. I like to wear bright pink, like, as much as possible. Most of the time, I'm in a bright pink lip or a bright red lip. Those things, like, see myself in the mirror walking by, and it makes me smile. Those things also help me snap back, you know? If I'm having a thought or if I'm stressed, like, that'll bring me back. Little things like that. Big things, connection. Oh my gosh, connection changed my life. This podcast changed my life. Hearing someone's story once, that changed my life. The people that I've met and the stories that I hear, you have no idea. I mean, I get so much out of every single one of them, and then I see what they do. And I see, like, this chain reaction that happens every single time, and that fills me up. There's so much, Pat. Like, so much.
There's so much wisdom in our experiences, and, I mean, you share incredible stories and wisdom within, the rare disease community. What are some of your favorite stories or your most moving stories?
Oh my gosh, like, I could not even pick one.
You can pick more than one. I know how you feel because I feel that way about Bump. I learned so much from the people who come on this podcast. I could never narrow it down to 1 or 2.
I'm gonna pick out 2 people that really mean a lot to me. My friend Daniel DeFabio. Daniel had a son named Lucas who had Menkes disease, and Menkes disease is an iron deficiency. It's curable if you find out in 10 days of birth if you have it. They didn't find out within 10 days, so Lucas's prognosis was 3 to 10 years. Daniel, his wife, and his other son lived every single day knowing that. Did so much incredible work, made so many family memories. And one of my favorite stories about Lucas, he has, first of all, like a smile that reaches ear to ear. I think they even referred to him as the boy who could smile from ear to ear. As a parent, I know I'm really scared when Ford is around other kids, or I wonder when he goes to school if anyone's gonna like him or play with him. And one day when Daniel was out putting Lucas on the bus, he heard a kid holler, "Lucas is here! Lucas is here! He's the boy that always brings us popcorn! Yay! Lucas is here!" Lucas didn't ever bring popcorn, But these kids were so excited that their buddy Lucas was getting on the bus, and Daniel didn't know if these kids had felt this way about his son. And it meant everything to him that these kids were so excited that their buddy Lucas was there to smile and just add to their little rat pack on the bus. And I know from my own experience how good that felt for Daniel. And I just love that that's one of his most special memories.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you found something in today's podcast that inspires you along your own life's path, because sometimes a bump in the road is actually a portal into a more conscious and meaningful life. You can subscribe to our free podcast at www.bumpintheroad.us or become a premium member to hear the full conversation. Just go to www.bumpintheroad.us for more information and to sign up.